Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs, the podcast for burned out, career-minded moms who are ready to stop pretending everything's fine and feel like themselves again. I'm your host, Christy Gamir, burnout coach for moms, licensed therapist, and mom of two. And I'm here to help you reclaim your energy, your identity, and your peace of mind. Whether you're lying awake thinking about the 87 things you didn't get done, or silently resenting the people you love most, this is your space to feel seen, supported, and not so alone. So grab your coffee, hot, cold, or day old, and let's get into it. Hey everybody, it's Christy. Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome our guest, Kari Hurd. Kari spent years playing by the shoulds. The house, the marriage, the minivan, the smile that says everything is fine. Spoiler, it wasn't. After hitting her midlife breaking point and subsequent awakening, she ditched expectations and started designing a life that actually lights her up. Now a speaker, best-selling author, podcast host, coach, and consultant, Kari helps women who are overcaffeinated, overwhelmed, and fresh out of Fs remember they're allowed to want more and go get it. She's here for real talk, big laughs, and the truth that it's never too late to build a life you love. So I've invited Kari here today to share her story, to really talk about, her experiences as a burned out working mom, what that looked like for her, and how she moved through it. So Kari, thank you so much
Hi.
for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
Yes, me too. So do you mind just starting off by telling us a little bit, about yourself, your family, your work, and really what did life look for you during those years where you were, playing by the shoulds?
Yeah, yep. So I'm gonna actually start kind of at the back end. I'll get to my current situation, but I think my shoulds actually started even before I left college. Um, Met my college sweetheart, got a degree in education because that's what everybody around me was doing. And, then subsequently got married to him and we had babies and we did the dog and the minivan and we did all those things, all the shoulds. And I think it stemmed from a place of I didn't have a clear vision of what I wanted. And we can circle back to that throughout this conversation because I think that becomes a big theme for me and things that I discovered. Um, so I had my babies. I drove the minivan. I hated that I loved the minivan.
I've heard that from a lot of people.
Yeah, like I hated that we got it and then we got it and I hated to admit that it was good and yeah, it was a thing. Um, we unfortunately ended up getting divorced due to some circumstances, whatever, and I ended up raising my kids on my own for the most part and then I was a teacher for 25 years. Um, Today, those two kids I am an empty nester. Those two kids are out on their own, living with their respective partners, and I have the best little tribe I could ever want. And, you know, on paper, and I think that this was the big sort of turning point for me was what I started with looked good on paper, but was not good for my soul. I
Mhm.
have now looks ridiculous on paper, but lights me up and keeps me sane and I'm living in this land of peace for myself. And not just for the moms listening, it's not just because my kids are out of the house. Like that isn't because I used to think that, right? And I think a lot of
Mhm.
like people listening is like, okay, well, once the kids get out of the house, then I'll feel sort of calmer and it won't be it's less chaotic, yes.
Mhm.
But less chaotic doesn't necessarily bring peace, right? And so I had to do a lot of introspection to find that peace and that what really lights me up and what brings me joy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you're really sort of touching on, expectations, right? Expectations that come from society, expectations that come from, a million different places. But you're also talking about really this idea of, success and what does that look like? Because it's different for, everybody. And a lot of people think that to be quote unquote successful is to, live that life based on what those expectations are. But to
Mhm.
your point, that is not the path, that is not the journey for everybody.
Right, right, and that's not to say that that's not the journey for some people, right?
Right.
That just wasn't I mean, it was my journey, it wasn't my best journey, if that makes sense, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's the journey I took, it wasn't the right journey for me. I knew it wasn't the right journey for me, I just didn't know what my right journey was. I don't know if I didn't take the time or I just never entertained or gave myself permission to explore what my right journey is, or if I had inklings of that, I would push them away because of expectations and because of shoulds and because they didn't make sense on paper, I would sort of push them away and I never really explored them in depth. And so, yeah, it's really about defining that for yourself. I think that's been the biggest lesson through all of this.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, so then just to kind of go back, to that time before you, really had this discovery, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about, what that looked like, as a burned out working mom. Like, what did burnout look like for you? Were there things that signs that maybe you ignored or you brushed off or just sort of like pushed through?
Yeah, I think when you're in it, like, you're in it, right? Because you just feel the stress. But I think there are definitely signs outside of that stress that you feel, and for me, it was little things like hyper organization. I always used to tell like, I had a friend one time tell me, like, he goes, "Girl, you make lists of your lists, and you color code both of those lists." Right? And, like, I'm a
Mhm.
kid that grew up watching Friends, like, that's my era, and I was Monica Geller to a T, like, everything had a list, and there was color coding, and there was outlines and things. In hindsight, and not that I'm not organized now, but in hindsight, that really was a control sort of coping mechanism, trauma response, if you will, to the chaos that I felt inside. It was sort of that was my way to try to keep everything in check. I was terrified that if one little thing fell out of line, the whole house of cards was coming down.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, and then also, obviously being a working mom, being a mom at all, is challenging in so
Uh-huh.
many ways. But then you add this other layer of, having a job, having a career, which makes it, harder. And then for you, there's this added layer on top of that where you were a single parent, right?
Uh-huh.
And so you were doing a lot of things, if not everything, on your own. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about that a little bit. Like, what were some of the challenges that you dealt with that were, uniquely specific to your situation as a single parent?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny when you're in it, and all the moms listening know this. When you're in it, like I said, you feel the stress, but also if you were to ask me like, "Well, how did you do it?" You go, I don't know, I just did it." Recently, I've been watching my sister's quite a bit younger than me, and she's got little littles, like little littles,
Mhm.
and of course, they're in all of the chaos of little littles, and
Yeah.
it's hilarious as an auntie to watch, but, like, she looked at me one time when I was visiting, and she goes, "How did you do this by yourself?" And I was like, "I don't know, I just kinda did it." But it got me thinking, and I started looking back, and I was like, "Holy crap," because I think the thing I didn't like, but you don't sort of realize that,
Mhm.
like, I didn't have anybody to tag in
Mhm.
on those really bad days when they're outnumbering you and they're all throwing tantrums at the same time, and they're like, yeah, that is stressful for any parent anytime, don't get me wrong. But as a single parent, you don't have that other person to tag in,
Mhm.
right? Even if you've had an amicable separation, there's just something about, like, you can't just be like, "Dude, I need 5 minutes."
Mhm.
You
Well,
have to go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, can I just so I'm understanding, specifically for you, were you in a situation where you were co-parenting? Did you have a partner who was helping in some ways, but wasn't necessarily there helping, every day? Like, what did that look like for you?
We were kind of an every other weekend situation. So, like, he was in the picture, but wasn't really there for any sort of help or support in that role.
Mhm. Okay, okay. So
Yep,
you were really doing everything on
it
your
was
own.
all me. It was all me. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, and so, you talk about essentially how, a lot of people, yeah, it's stressful for anybody. Like even listening to you talk when you're like, oh, yeah, you just kind of know it and you look back and you're like, how did I do it? Like that's what I think about. That's how I feel when I think about, childhood illnesses. We had kids that, for a period of time between the two of them were literally sick every other week. It's one of the most stressful things you can deal with. And looking back, I don't know how we ever did it. But
Mhm.
also, there were 2 of us, right? And so even though I was taking on most of it, if I really felt like I couldn't do something, I had that other person. And you were doing it on your own, which makes it, I would imagine, infinitely more challenging, right? And so I'm curious though, because a lot of people don't, I think, necessarily really understand who aren't in those shoes themselves. So I'm curious if there are things that you wish more people understood about being a single parent.
Yeah, I think I think the biggest thing is, as a single parent, I never really wanted anyone to sort of pity me,
Mhm.
but also sort of and I was very blessed. I had a lot of people around me who gave me lots of grace, and I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is just to have grace. And I think the other thing is just to like it, I don't know a single parent that wouldn't accept help if it was offered, but I also don't know many single parents that will ask for help. Like
Mm.
in our experience, at least in my experience, I shouldn't speak for all single parents. Let me clarify.
Mhm.
In my experience, asking for help came with stipulations a lot for a lot of different reasons, not just because of my ex, not just in my life in general. That's just sort of been a theme. And so it was really difficult for me to ask for help. Um, and it was really difficult to accept. Like, I never wanted there to be strings, and so I think just always having that grace of, like, I if you're gonna offer help, just make sure it's clear, like, "Listen, this is let me just take them for an hour to the zoo," or whatever. It just to make sure that that's clear, because I think a lot of
Mhm.
I don't know, at least, like I said, that was my experience, was like, "Am I gonna
Yeah.
do something later?" Or, like, "Is this gonna get held over my head later?" Like, I don't know.
Well, it sounds like, you were personally experiencing some of that. And
Yeah.
even maybe in instances where parents are not experiencing that, maybe there's still that fear, that concern, like, what are they expecting on the other side of things, right? So just this idea that, yes, we would love the help. And if you're going to offer it, like, know that I may or may not be able to return it later. So don't come and do it with that expectation. Do it because you
Right.
genuinely want to help.
Yes, yes. Not to say that we wouldn't, but you know what I'm saying? It just was always more of that underlying, and again, that was my own experience, but I think just always having that grace to
Yeah.
know, like, single parents are doing a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, so then, when you were, in the thick of it, and you were talking about how you were doing everything the way that you should be doing it, the way that you're supposed to be doing it, but it really wasn't working for you. It wasn't lighting you up. How did you finally realize that something needed to change? Like, what was that point for you where you had that, sudden, you refer to it as a subsequent awakening?
Yeah. Well, I choose the word awakening because I feel like we overuse the term midlife crisis. Like, on paper, it probably looked like a crisis, but, like, I learned a lot from it, and I was able to literally sort of awaken in me what had been sort of stifled by the shoulds. Um, my realization came when the universe quite literally smacked me upside the head and started just upturning everything. I had been in my ideal job at the time and was asked to shift positions, shift roles. Um, not I mean, it was fine, it just I was asked to go back to the classroom. I had been in a different sort of supporting role, and I was asked to go back to the classroom, and that just wasn't where I was wanting to go. Um, an 11-year relationship that I had been in after my marriage came to an end, and so it was like all of these things that, again, on paper looked perfect, just sort of started to crumble around me, and it just I think I just sort of chose to steer into the skid, and I was like, "Well, if I can't have all the things I think I want, all these things that were going well, if you're gonna take all those away, then we're just gonna burn this whole thing down to the studs and start over."
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and then that's sort of that was the pivotal moment, and that was, like, 2018, 2019.
Okay, okay. Now, when you did recognize that, was that I mean, how did that I guess I'm wondering, like, how did that feel for you? Like, was that when you had to sort of admit to yourself, like,
Mhm.
"Hey, this isn't working and I do need to change something," what was the hardest part about that for you?
Um, I think to kinda circle back where I started, it was this idea that, okay, well, if none of that's gonna work out, and I've never paused to give myself the opportunity or give myself permission to explore what would light me up, it it was like this moment I was frustrated because I was like, "Well, I don't even know what to do next. I don't know what I want. Like, if that's not gonna be my career, I don't know what my career is gonna be, and if that's not the relationship I'm meant to be in, I don't know what that's supposed to look like." And so it was, like, just this deep sort of frustration that I didn't know, and you go through this gamut of emotions, like, I was angry because I hadn't given myself that permission prior or that I hadn't taken the time to explore. I was, like I said, frustrated. It's overwhelming because all of a sudden you're faced with because at this point my kids were still at home.
Mhm.
And so I've got these children at home. I've left this career that I've had for 20 years and now what am I going to do? And I've got to support these children and um so it's just this whole flood of things and then on top of that, you've got all the things you're sort of starting to discover about yourself,
Mhm. Well,
right?
and if I'm understanding right, it sounds like you left your career without necessarily having that plan in place,
Correct.
without knowing your
Yes.
next step.
Yeah. When they asked me to go back to the classroom, and I did go back for a year, I
Mhm.
just my heart wasn't in it anymore, and so I was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna go not do that. Um, we're not gonna do that anymore."
Mhm.
I explored, like, being an online coach because part of what I did during my time in education was coaching teachers, which I really loved, and so I thought, "Okay,
Mhm.
well, I can go do online coaching and help women kind of, more on that personal level," and that felt like it was gonna be really fulfilling. There was a whole piece of that that I just wasn't like, the business side of it it was a whole thing. And so it's like you're starting over, but you're not in your 20s anymore. You're not sort
Yeah.
of adventurous anymore. You're not sort of carefree about like, "Oh, I can go change my major to this, or I can go do that." Like, you're doing all of that in the throes of real life.
Well, and as you get older, I would imagine for a lot of people, the stakes feel much higher. The risks feel much
Right.
higher of just sort of letting things
Yes.
go.
Yes.
Mhm.
I have to say, so in the midst of all of that, having all of the fears as a parent and having all of the exactly to your point, um, I was sitting on the couch one day with my oldest and just we were just kinda chit-chatting and we're very close and they looked at me and they said, "You know, mom, I know that I can see that what you're going through is really, really stressful. And I know that you're struggling a lot right now. But I need you to know that I love that I get to watch you and learn alongside you at my age so that I don't have to do it when I'm your age." And, like,
Wow.
in that moment I know, right?
That's
I still
amazing.
that was a long time that was a few years ago, and I still get teary-eyed. But,
No,
like
I feel
I
all the
know.
emotions just listening to you
Yes,
say that. Oh my
yes,
goodness.
yes. And so it I think in that moment, even though there were lots of things still sort of crumbling around me, I knew that I was gonna be okay because my biggest fear was them.
Mhm.
And if they were okay watching me struggle, and I think that was the thing, right? No parent wants their kid to see them struggle.
Right.
If they were okay watching me struggle, as long as they knew there was a better outcome, then it was gonna be fine.
Well, and the thing that I love about that too is I feel like so many moms, are hesitant or afraid to do certain things, to make certain moves, to make certain decisions because, to your point, maybe it is going to have a negative impact on their kids in some way. But what I think a lot of times we forget or don't realize is that we're also modeling for them, right? And we're showing them, that it is okay to make big changes. It is okay to take chances. It is okay to do things, for ourselves. And if it's okay for us, we're showing them that it's okay for them too.
Exactly, and, we actually she and I revisited that conversation a couple weeks ago, actually, um, and just reiterated something similar where it was like, just watching all of the things you've done these last few years, mom, has given me sort of that permission to be more choosy about my career, make shifts when I need to make shifts, and so, at the end of the day, all the struggle was worth it if I could've if I instilled that in either, let alone I'm my youngest one isn't one to share stuff like that necessarily, but, like, I see it in her too, so,
Yeah, no, that's amazing.
yeah.
Well, and so I'm wondering, so going back to this time, you knew that you didn't want to go back into the classroom. You knew that something needed to change. Weren't sure what those next steps were going to look like. So how did you start to move through that? Like, how did you start to really sort of explore and discover and learn about, what was going to be a better fit for you?
There was a little bit of trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of bit of trial and error. Um, but also I I stepped into, my spiritual side, which, like, I'm not here to sort of preach spirituality, but, like, I really got into journaling, which I had previously
Mm-hmm.
absolutely hated journaling.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know, like, one day I picked up a journal and just started writing. I had been working with a coach at the time, and she's like, "Just try it." And I was like, "Ugh." And I uncovered a lot. And I think the biggest question, so if you're someone listening who's sort of in that stage, I think the biggest question you can ask yourself is just to be really on like, I do workshops now on really creating that vision of what you want to feel on the day to day, like, not what you want it to necessarily look like, not what house you wanna live in, not what car you wanna drive, not what actual job you wanna have, but how do you wanna feel in your career? How do you wanna feel in your home? How do you wanna feel in, just when you're out in the world, and really start tapping into that? Because once I did that, then the opportunities that brought those feelings, I started finding them because I that became sort of I call it my inner GPS, right? Like, that became my compass for, like, okay, if I'm gonna take this job, is it gonna give me those feelings that I said I wanted? And if not, like, I'd rather wait for a different job. And that in and of itself is super scary, right? To, like, say no to opportunities when you're like, "Oh my god, I need a job and I should take this job
Mhm.
because it's a good job." But I if I'm gonna be unhappy 6 months from now,
Mhm.
then there's no point.
Well, and it sort of raises the question of what is a good job, right? Again, that
Exactly.
idea, it's gonna mean different things for different people. If you're not happy, is it really a good job? I don't know.
Exactly,
Depends
right?
on your priorities.
So, yeah, so really just tapping into, like I said, those energies and those emotions and those things you wanna feel on the day to day, um, and then that's what you'll start attracting, and it's not overnight because you have to there's also a piece if you've gotten this far without like, I my intuition's pretty strong. I spent a lot of years ignoring it because it told me things that didn't sort of make sense with the shoulds, right? Like, my
Mhm.
intuition would say ABC, and the shoulds were saying XYZ, and those things didn't match. And so you start ignoring your intuition. So it takes a minute to really allow yourself to start listening to that. But I think that's probably the second thing, right? Is just once you tap into, okay, what do I want to feel? I want to feel freedom, or I want to feel peace, and really getting clear. I always tell people, get past even like the common ones, right? Like, I want to be happy. Well, duh, everybody wants to be happy. What does
Mhm.
happy mean to you? Like, peel
Mhm.
back the layers of the onion a little bit. For
Yeah,
me,
absolutely.
right? For me, I came out of a meditation one time, and this was pretty early in my journey, and I think this was one of those turning points. Like I said, I had started journaling a little bit. Um, I found a meditation on an app that I use, and when we came out of the meditation, she had instructed us to, like, pinpoint words that had come up for us and try to create a mantra out of it. And my mantra at that time was, "I am living a simple, effortless life full of joy, abundance, and love." And I don't know, it like, literally, when I opened my eyes, that just spilled out of me and onto the paper.
Mhm.
And so then every day, I just lived towards that, right? Is this gonna
Yeah.
bring me one of those things? Every decision I made, is it gonna bring me joy? Is it gonna bring me abundance? Is it gonna help me feel love? And is it gonna keep my life simple? And so now, like I said, on paper, my life probably looks ridiculous to some people. I'm 51 years old, living in a 700 square foot studio. I love every second of it because my life is simple. I have
Mhm.
created simplicity for myself. And again, not just because my kids aren't at home. I think that if the 5 of us lived in the same dwelling, we'd probably kill each other for different reasons than we would have before, but at the same time, I think that simplicity would still be there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely.
So
Well, and one of the things that, I always sort of encourage people to think about, regardless of what it is that we're talking about or what it is that we're thinking about, is, with any decision that you make, with any action that you take, what is the goal? What is it that you're ultimately trying to accomplish? And how are these decisions helping you move towards or away from them? Right. And
yes,
it sounds like essentially that's what you're describing, right? But in the terms of how do you actually want to live your life? Like, what does that really mean and look like for you, and having that picture in mind for when you make those decisions.
exactly, and I always say, like, it when I don't coach often, but when I do and somebody says, "Well, I want a six-figure a month job," or whatever.
Mhm.
Okay, that's fine, but what's the feeling underneath that? Like, why do you want that?
Mhm.
And because the thing is, the stuff, the job, the cars, the house, even, to have a partner, the stuff is a means to an end. And until you know what that end is, the stuff isn't going to bring you any of the things you think it's going to because you don't even know what it is you're looking for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, so okay, so as you were, going through all of this and making these decisions and, moving into the life that really felt more aligned with you, you talk about you ditched the expectations, right? That was the life you were moving away from. And so more specifically, like, what did that look like for you, to actually ditch those expectations and to let go of some of the pressure that a lot of people feel, that you might have felt to hold on to those?
Yeah, I I'm gonna be I mean, I'm happy to answer that question. I'm gonna tell you that I don't know that the way I did it was necessarily effective or efficient at the time, but it was the journey that I needed to take. So
Okay.
like I said, I started an online coaching business that did not go well, mostly because I didn't really know what I was doing on the business end of it.
Mhm.
In the meantime, I was working odd part-time jobs that were not always covering all of the bills, and so I had that added stress.
Mhm.
Um, which is why I kinda circle back, and I'll finish answering your question, but when I say, like, figure out the feeling you want first, because I didn't know that feeling yet, and so like I said, it was a lot of that trial and error of like, "Oh, well, I'll go do this part-time job for a while I try to build my coaching business, but I don't really know if I even wanna be a coach." And so it was a lot of, like, trying things on
Mhm.
that didn't necessarily fit either,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? Like, going into
Yeah.
the fitting room with, like, 6 different things and none of them fit, and that's what I spent a lot of time doing, um And in the meantime, like I said, this is where that sort of midlife crisis perception comes in, right? I was jumping from part-time job to part-time job, and I was still not really happy because I didn't know what I was looking for. Like I had started to, but it was like, oh, so maybe like I had blonde hair for most of my life. And then I went dark and I was like, well, maybe if I do that, like it was silly little things. And I was like, well, I'll try that on and see if that works. Oh, that doesn't work. Okay, goodbye. And then I'll try that on. And again, still not having that sort of compass. Um,
Yeah, but when you said a minute ago, you're like, "Oh, I don't know if this is necessarily the best way to do it." But I mean, I completely agree with you. And I can certainly think of, examples from my own life and, which I'm not going to get into, but just this idea that sometimes we do have to try different things. Sometimes we have to go through that process of
yes.
exploring and learning and making mistakes and getting it wrong to ultimately land with
Yes.
and find what is right. And sometimes where we end up is exactly where we started, except with more knowledge and awareness of like
Yes.
why that's is a space that we want to be in.
Yes. I love that. Yes. 100%, right? You end up circling back around, but it's like you have to sort of see how that all fits together. So, yeah,
Yeah.
not that the trial and error itself was bad, it was just that, like, it was difficult. It wasn't the easiest route to take,
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely.
right? So, it's not that it wasn't the right thing for me to do, it just was a difficult thing to do sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and difficult things can be uncomfortable, right? But like being in a state of discomfort is not necessarily a bad thing, right? A lot of
Right,
times people try to avoid being uncomfortable, but sometimes we have to deal with that discomfort to be able to, push through it and
right.
come out, in a better place. Yeah. So no, that makes a lot of sense.
And I think a lot of the trial and error also, like, it helped me the biggest thing it helped me get over was other people's perception, right? Like, here I
Mhm.
was, this whole grown woman with children who left a 25-year or 20-year career at the time, eh, to go work part-time at the local coffee shop. Like,
Mhm.
people have opinions about that.
Yeah, but they're irrelevant.
Correct, but I had to learn that lesson, right? Like,
Yeah.
that was a lot. I had, like, friends and family who were like, "Are you doing okay? Are you sure you're okay?" Like, they were and again, I'm blessed that they were concerned for me, but it was
Mhm.
like I had to get over that, like, worrying about what they thought, and that's how I needed to do, like, that was the lesson in that for me, was like, "It doesn't matter what they think. Is this
Well,
making you happy? Then do it."
and that can be really hard because, I mean, to your point, a lot of the people who are going to have opinions about the way we live our lives are not even necessarily people who are out there trying to judge us or anything like that. A lot of times they're the people who really care about us. They're really well intentioned. But what they are seeing is the quote unquote right decisions, the right choices, the right way to live your life. That's through their lens, from their perspective, based on their values, and what is maybe going to be right for them isn't necessarily going to fit for you or for anybody else, right? And so that can
100%.
be a really hard thing.
Yeah, 100%, and so that was definitely the lesson I had to learn from that. So,
Okay. So, like, looking back, if you, could talk to your past self, during all those years when you did struggle with burnout, is there anything that you wish you could go back and say?
I mean, I'm not one to live with regrets. Like, I've lived through some difficult things, and they've brought me here, and I think a lot of us are at that at we believe that, but if I had to go teach myself something, I think it would be just to give myself permission, even as far back, like I said, as college when this kind of started, to give myself permission to explore the thing that didn't make sense.
Mhm.
Give
Okay.
make room for things that don't fit a certain mold if it brings you excitement. I one time, like, 3rd year of college, I had w like, kind of a daydream or a vision or whatever, just randomly, of, like, being this, like, high-powered business executive flying and jet setting around the world and doing all these things. It That's not my personality at all,
Mhm.
but it excited the crap out of me.
Mhm.
So I took accounting. I didn't do very well in accounting, and so I was like, "Oh, see, that's silly. I shouldn't do that." I totally disregarded how much excitement that brought me
Mm,
and fell
mhm.
immediately into, "Oh, well, that doesn't make sense, so I'm not gonna do that." And so I think I would tell my younger self at all the phases too, because like, it's happened all throughout, right? That's how you get sort of to
Yeah.
that maximum level of burnout is you just I think I would just say, "Just explore those things even when they don't make sense."
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, so then for the moms who are listening, who are feeling inspired, and are wanting to start, exploring or
Well,
making some of these similar kinds of shifts, but maybe they don't know where to start, or maybe it is feeling really scary for them. Like, what do you think is maybe a good starting point?
I really think to take pen to paper, even if you're not a journaler, like I mentioned earlier, I literally hated it, you guys. I hated it. I
Mm-hmm.
hated it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was stupid. I never got anything out of it. But just to really take pen to paper and start journaling the feelings that you're having and not, and again, like digging deeper. And I know you're people listening are going, I don't have time to sit and like explore my feelings. I know you don't because you're a busy mom. You don't. But finding some way, whether it's recording a voice note on your phone, whether it's taking pen to paper, whether it's recording an actual like note on your phone, whatever it is, start paying attention to the bigger feelings. Like, yes, you're stressed and yes, you're burnt out, but what are some things that bring you joy and what kind of joy are you looking for? Because joy is different for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind
Yeah.
of are you looking are you an adventurous joy kind of person? Are you like I'm quiet, calm, simple? I somebody once told me I give off old lady energy and I was like, all right, whatever. Like so what kind of joy? What are those words that bring you joy? Again, adventure, excitement, calm, peace, whatever it is. Um, and just really start tapping into that and find, you don't have to uproot your whole life like I did. I tell people that all the time. Like I did it the hard way. And again, we already covered the fact that, that was my way and that's how I did it. You can do it more simply. Like if you're a busy mom, find one or two of those energies or emotions that you really want to be a part of your everyday life
Mm-hmm.
and find ways to infuse them. And what
Yeah.
you'll find is it snowballs, right? Like I said, I came out with that mantra about simplicity. It took me a few years to really get to simple, but it's you find little ways, right? You start using those words again as compass points or as gauges in the moment of like even silly little things like what you want to have for breakfast, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
is this going to bring me the feeling that I really want to have about myself in my day if I eat this for breakfast?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, to your point, like even the small things, right? It's not just necessarily like just the big decisions, but
Yeah.
really just everything that you're doing as you like move throughout your day to day.
Yeah.
So, oh,
Yeah,
go
and
ahead.
I think the other one big lesson I always like to leave people with too is somebody else's solution is not necessarily gonna work for you.
Yeah.
So, if you see your bestie or your soccer mom friend or your neighbor or your sibling or whatever who's living their best life, what you see on the outside is different than what they're experiencing on the inside, so just take that. But also, how they got there may not be the right way for you, and that's why it's so important to get introspective about what you want,
Yeah. No, absolutely.
right?
Yeah. So, I mean, and this has all been really great. I really do think I love it when people come on and share their personal stories because I think there's so much value in, knowing that we're not alone in our experiences. And I really think that we can learn a lot from each other. So I really appreciate this. For people who are wanting to, connect with you or follow you or learn more about you and the work that you do, where can they go to do that?
I in the interest of simplicity, I've actually kind of gotten rid of quite a lot of platforms, which has been nice.
Okay.
They can find me on Instagram. It's at Car I can't remember if there's a dot in there, at Kari Hurd or at Kari.Hurd, one of the 2.
Okay. The one
They
you
can
sent me, I don't see a dot in
yeah.
here.
So it's that one.
Okay.
It's that one, so no dot.
Okay.
I think I changed it at some point. So, yeah, at Kari Hurd over on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, which I know isn't always sort of super woo-woo, but I'm over on LinkedIn. I think same handle. They can also just email me, kari.hurd@gmail.com. and
Okay.
that's or whatever email I gave you to put in the show notes, like, either of those is fine too. Um
You had also given me a Substack.
Oh, yeah, they can find me there. I always forget about that one. That's more my, like, creative outlet.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So
yeah.
lots of different options. So
All the
I will
options. I
all the
more of a, like
options.
yeah, and I'm more of a, like, if they find me on a platform, if they shoot me a DM, I'm happy to respond, and it will always be me. I don't have any auto replies set up or anything like that. They'll always as long as they tell me where they found me, because sometimes, you get the messages, the DMs, and you're like, "Where?" So if they tell me they found me from you, right, I would love to
Mhm.
connect with anybody. I've got a journal with full of prompts that I've used since the start of my journey.
Mhm.
If people are interested in that, I've got, other sort of trackers and worksheets and different things like that that I've used that have helped me to discover some things, so
Okay, great. This is awesome. So, as always, I will make sure that I include all those things in the show notes, for anybody who wants to connect with you.
great.
Um, and so before we wrap up for today, I always like to ask, if you could leave, I know you just gave your two big pieces of
Yeah, yeah,
advice
yeah.
a second ago, so I don't know if
That's
there's
okay.
anything else, but if you could leave the listeners with one final message, one final piece of advice, what would it be?
I think the first big thing you have to do before you can start any of this kind of work is to give yourself permission to do it.
Mhm.
And so if you're listening right now and you can't give that to yourself, this is me giving you that permission. And this is me just saying, you're not alone in this, because I think sometimes we do feel really isolated about it, right? Like everybody sort of seems to have everything together all the time, and that's just not
Mhm.
the case, right? Which so why I love the premise of your podcast. Like we're not alone in any of this. So just give yourself some grace, give yourself permission, and know that by you even just exploring things that might light you up, y there's no reason to feel guilt about that. You're not taking anything from your kids, you're not taking anything from your spouse if you have one, you're not taking anything from any of your friends or family. And we hear it all the time, so it feels like there's lip service to it, but pouring into ourselves truly is the best gift we can give to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. I love how you put that. So, well, thank you again. This has been really wonderful. I really enjoyed
No.
talking to you.
Yeah.
And as always, for the moms who are listening, if any of this resonates, if you found it to be helpful, please, for starters, feel free to connect with Kari,
Yeah.
or please share this podcast with any other moms who could maybe use some support. Because as always, we are all in this together.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me, Chrissy. This has been a great conversation.
Yes, absolutely.